Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for coming, everybody. I apologize. The name of this session actually turns out to be a little wrong and actually kind of backwards. So this is going to be more about driving users with product design. It's a little bit of both, but I'll explain as we proceed. So if you don't know who I am, I introduced myself in the keynote, but I had this blog, Coding Horror, which I've run since 2014. I still sporadically write. And I'm co-founder of Stack Overflow, which is a Q&A site for programmers, which you're probably familiar with. So this talk isn't going to be about those two things. This is going to drill pretty deeply into my current project, which is Discourse. And I was very excited to get the word discourse as our name, because first of all, naming is very difficult. You've probably heard the old joke, there's two hard things in computer science, cache and validation, naming, and off by one errors. So I was happy to get the name that kind of made sense, but it's also kind of a fancy name. Like, you'll see the word discourse come up. I get excited because when I read news articles where they're talking about discussions, like, they'll use this word, and I'm like, yes, that's the word. That's why I started this project, is how can we have actual discourse with other humans without it breaking down into like the howling of wolves? And that is why the actual name of our company is Civilized Discourse Construction Kit Incorporated. In other words, I want to give you software that lets you have civilized discussions with other humans. So this is what the software kind of looks like. This is our homepage. And you know, there's a lot of sort of hand-wringing that goes on around, you know, what's happening, right? There's a lot of polarization. But there's a lot of fun opportunities for this word discourse to appear. And these are the kind of problems that I was trying to address when I started Discourse. Like, I want online environments where people aren't telling me, don't read the comments. I was like, well, the comments are the people, right? Like, I mean, is there something wrong with people that we don't want to read what they're writing? Like, I feel like this is a software problem. The software should be able to help us have discussions where people aren't going, no, don't read the comments. You'll just, you know, end up not wanting to be part of the human race anymore. So this is also very timely, because when I started in 2012, we didn't have the current political situation, but it's become deeply polarized to a degree that I think nobody anticipated in the world. And you know, there's this othering that goes on of people where it's like, these people believe a different thing than me, and you know, they're essentially the devil, right? Like, we have nothing in common. They're not even human, right? Like, we've gotten to such a weird place in public discourse that, like, I'm happy that I started on this, but it's a very daunting problem to take on in software. But those are fun problems, because I feel like software is people at some level, right? Like, that's what's interesting about software, is that it helps you, you know, become a better person. As I mentioned in my keynote, that's kind of the ultimate goal. This is one of my favorite quotes. Mark Andreessen eventually deleted his Twitter account, so this is not there anymore. But I love this statement because it does emphasize that, you know, the people who do software kind of want everything. Like, everybody carries a supercomputer in their pocket with them on their person almost every waking moment now. This is a world I would never have envisioned as like a young geek, and we're kind of like the dog that caught the bus. Like, we don't really know what to do with what we have. I mean, a lot of the news that's currently happening around Facebook, around the election, around Twitter, it's kind of like the dog that caught the bus, right? We have this situation where everybody's interacting with software like every possible moment, but is the software really helping them do what they need to do? Is the software like helping them make good choices as humans? And I would argue kind of no, it's not. And that's kind of what I was trying to get into with Discourse, is like, how can the software help us make better choices? So, you know, that's the good news. We're infinitely connected in ways we never would have anticipated even 10 years ago, right? Like, this idea that any given moment you could contact someone instantly and have a nearly instant response is kind of nuts, right? Like, over like chat software. So that's the good news, is we're infinitely connected. But that's also kind of the bad news, because you're going to find out things about people that you didn't maybe want to know, and that you shouldn't have known. So getting back to Discourse, when I sat down to design Discourse, I said one of the frustrations for me with forum software was that it spends so much time on just stupid stuff I don't care about. Like, here's how you make something bold. You know, here's how you make a post. Here's how you reply to a post. I was like, those aren't the hard problems in forum software. The hard problems in forum software are, why is this person trolling me? Why are these people yelling at me? Why won't anyone come here? Those are the hard problems in forum software. not how do I make a thread, right? Or how do I put it in the right category? So they're worried about completely the wrong problems. They're worried about mechanical software problems that are really simple. And the people problems are deep and hard, and that's where it's really interesting to me. Like, that's what I wanted to spend time on is, how do you get software to teach you to get along with people? Because that's the goal, isn't it? That's what we're all here to do. We're not really here to make things bold. We're here to kind of figure out how to get along with each other. So the first step on the road to figuring out like how to get people to get along together is, of course, rules, right? And programmers love rules. That's what the computer is a giant system of rules that execute constantly, right? So all we need is a good set of rules. If we just had a good set of rules, everybody could get along together. So here's a picture of a set of rules. This is a picture I actually took. It's a McDonald's that's close to where I live. And it's interesting because everything on this list, if you look at the list, it has what I call the no elephants rule, which everything on this list is probably there because that happened before, and it was a problem. So it was a reactive rule. Somebody brought an elephant, and you're like, dude, don't bring any elephants, right? So now we have a rule. Please stop bringing all your elephants to McDonald's, right? So every rule that's there is kind of there reactively. It's not really an inspirational list. It's like just a list of things you should do. And nobody would really object to these rules. These are simple, clear rules. And yet at the same time, when you go to McDonald's, pretty well understood commercial interaction, they still have to print the rules because some people are going to run afoul of these very, very simple rules. So we have that at Discourse. We spent a lot of time when we launched the project saying, look, let's have a simple, not too long list of just things you can do to have positive, constructive interactions with other people in discussion, right? And it's a great list. It's like maybe, 6, 7 paragraphs. It's not really long. But then you have the challenge of okay, we have rules, but how many people actually read this, right? They come to your site. They're not really there to read about your rules. They're there to do something. So they don't care about your rules. So you got to think from a software perspective, how can I get people to at least look at this and acknowledge it? And to be fair, maybe they saw it somewhere else. Maybe they've seen the Discourse rule set. It's like, okay, I already know this because I've been to 5 other Discourse sites, and the rules are always the same. So one way you can do is we have a badge, right? If you actually read the rules, now I can't guarantee you read them. You scrolled to the bottom of the rules, let's say. You get a badge for that. Now, there's a bunch of other badges you can get, but this is a way to encourage the right behavior, which is at least, hey, did you even look at the rules that we have before you came here? The other thing we do is on the hamburger menu, where you kind of hide all the other options in your software, we put a little indicator on the FAQ, which is the rules, that indicates, hey, if you're the type of person that likes to clear indicators, which I'm OCD, so I like to clear indicators, then you can clear this indicator by clicking here and read about our rules. So those are some ways to get people to at least look at the rules, but you've got to acknowledge the rules are not really the full solution. They're sort of a linchpin of your strategy, but they're not how it gets done. So here's an example of Airbnb. Something happened to my Airbnb account. I don't understand what happened, but I had to sign up for a new Airbnb account. And when I did, at one point in the sign up, it basically said, okay, look, you're signing up for Airbnb. You start forcing rules on people, you're going to find some behaviors that you didn't anticipate. And some of it will be knee-jerk rejection of the rules that you're putting in front of them. There's a really great oatmeal on the Backfire Effect. So if you search for, just go to Google, type Backfire Effect oatmeal, and I love the oatmeal style of narrative comic explanation. So I encourage you to read through that to understand, and it also kind of tries to explain what's going on in the United States at this point, at least some parts of it. So I think it's good to understand the Backfire Effect. Now that said, you still want to have rules, because if you don't have any rules, if you don't have a list of things that you stand for, then you don't stand for anything, okay? And at that point, anything goes. So you still need this shining statue of look, these are our goals, these are the things that we believe in. It's why this conference has a code of conduct, right? I mean, hopefully you don't have to enforce it, but you need to have it because it says this is what we believe in. It's the same reason people get married and take public vows to stay married, even though sometimes they probably don't. They wanted to, right? You have this lofty goal. Yes, we will be married for the rest of our lives. Maybe it doesn't work out. That's okay. But you want to have these lofty aspirational goals, because not having lofty aspirational goals is just a dark place to be in life. Now, once you have the rules, then the question is, okay, well, how do you get people to follow the rules, right? Without nagging them, without people feeling they were forced to follow the rules. How do you do this? So there's a great book on this. It's called The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. All of Dan Ariely's books are really genius. I highly recommend this one. One of the things you learn from this book, I'll spoil it for you so you don't have to read it. It's really two things. One is that if you want people to be honest, you have to remind them to be honest at the time of temptation, okay? At the time when they see a till with tons of money that's just sitting there, that is the point at which you need to remind them, hey, do you want to, do you really want to be considered a thief, right? So ethics classes from 10 years ago, not effective. A bunch of policies they probably didn't read, not effective. The only thing that really works is reminding people at the time of temptation to sort of, again, be their better selves. And there's another subtlety to this. So it's not just the just-in-time nudges. That's really critical. And we do this a ton in discourse. I'll give you a bunch of examples in a minute. An interesting study they did, this is in England. They had a big problem with stolen bicycles getting stolen. So what they did was they put up this sign, "Cycle thieves, we are watching you," with a pair of male eyes. And all they did was literally put this sign up. And they did it at some locations, and other locations they didn't. But at the locations where the sign was up, there was like a 62% reduction in stolen bicycles, all because of the sign. Now you might say, oh, well, that's because they saw the sign and they realized, oh, if I steal a bicycle, I'll get in trouble. But it doesn't actually work that way. In Dan Ariely's book, he defines the reason people don't steal is not because there's a rule against stealing. They don't give a crap about your rule against stealing. They do not want to think of themselves as people who steal. That is critical to understanding the lesson in the book. And that's also why I think this works. People are reminded by that sign, it's like, oh, geez, if I steal this bike, I'm a person who steals bicycles from like somebody who needed that bike, right? Like, or maybe they can't go to work, or maybe they can't go to class, right? I'm kind of a bad person if I do that. And that's the reminder that you're actually giving them with the sign. It's not, I will punish you, because they don't give a crap. What they give a crap about is themselves and how they think of themselves. So that's, I think, really an interesting application of this. Now, when it comes to the internet, this is XKCD 386. To me, the most classic XKCD, because I deal with this on an ongoing basis as a person, right? Somebody is wrong on the internet. So this is the point of temptation, right? So that was one of the key insights I had at Discourse. You're reading a topic, you're reading something, it doesn't matter, and you get to a point in the topic, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What you just said right there is some BS, right? And I'm going to tell you why. So this is the point that someone is wrong in the internet. So what we do in Discourse at that point is, at the moment you start typing, we're like, okay, now you're telling people that they're wrong on the internet. You've started typing. I'm about to tell you how deeply wrong you are. At that point, I want to remind you to be your better self, right? Are you just yelling at people? Are you attacking a person versus an idea? It's okay to attack ideas, but it's not really cool to attack people. And are you actually improving the conversation? Are you just here to rant and rave? Or is this going to be like interesting, right, for other people to read at some level? Like at least be funny at some level. So that's, I think, one of the things we try to leverage in Discourse a lot is this idea of the just-in-time. Like, when is the moment at which we can intervene in software and remind people to do things that are kind of in their best interest anyway? Another example of this is the like button. So one of the goals I had in Discourse is I don't really want people to type like yes, no, cool, one-word replies. That's a chat system. We're not really a chat system. I mean, you can kind of use it that way, but it's not really the intent. I want people to type sentences. And ideally, paragraphs if you're up to it, but at least a sentence, right? Like, give me a sentence. We're having a conversation. Give me a complete sentence that's like a thought, right? So how do you incentivize that? Well, first, we won't let you post by default in Discourse if it's less than 15 characters. And people hated that. We had a whole design issue where people were complaining constantly that I have to type 15 characters. Oh God, how can you possibly make me type 15 characters when all I want to type is yes, exclamation point, right? And you have to explain them over and over. So rather than doing that, we added some education. It's like, look, okay, cool. You just want to say the word cool. Well, we have a button for that. It's called, the like button, which for us is the heart, which is about empathy, which I talked about. Hey, maybe you could push that, And then you're expressing the sentiment without, cluttering the discussion with another reply. That's just the word cool, right? So that's another way to sort of step in at the moment of temptation. I want to post a really short reply. Well, but do you really? Do you really want to post just one word in a discussion? Like, does that add to the discussion? So ideally, you start thinking about the stuff with these little nudges that we're giving you about the software, right? And about improving discussions between people. Another thing that I put in, and I actually put this in for me, I found that one thing I would do in discussions is I would sort of find one person and essentially argue with that person, you know? Like, I would be in a conversation, and there's, I don't know, 10 people in conversation, but I'm just focusing on that one person, and I'm just replying to that one person. So I wanted to add something in discourse, and I don't think my copy here is particularly good. I need to talk to Seth Godin and get something good here. But what I want people to do is realize, like, you know, don't be that person that's sort of haranguing another person. Like, a good conversation is full of diverse voices. And when you're replying to the same person 3, 4, 5 times in a row, is that really adding to the conversation, or is that like two people sort of bickering with each other, right? And there's a lot of places you can do this. You can think, okay, think of situations, and again, this is a lot about me. Like, I want to be better at this stuff. Like, I don't want to be the guy who argues with people all the time. I don't want to be the person that's making the discussion worse. I want to learn to do this better, and I want the software to help everyone learn to do this better. So some other scenarios where this is helpful is if you're posting a link that's already been posted earlier in the discussion, we'll gently say, hey, that's a cool link, but you know, Joe already posted it 2 days ago. Are you sure you want to post another link to this thing? Because it kind of implies you didn't really read the conversation if you're posting a duplicate link. I mean, you might have a valid reason, but that's one reason not to do that. Or if you're just replying to the same topic over and over, like you go to a site, unless it's like a single serving site where all they do is discuss that one topic, and you're only replying to one topic. Well, maybe there's other things you could discuss there with people, right? Like, are you sort of a one-issue person? Are you here to give us like talking points? So I think there's a lot of opportunities to intervene and think about, like, again, the just in time. When the exact thing is happening, how can the software step in and sort of help them adapt that behavior? And they can be the person that they want to be, rather than the person that their emotions are kind of making them be at that moment. So I'm a huge fan of this example. So there's this site called Nextdoor. It's essentially Facebook for neighborhoods. So the idea is that everybody on your street would be a part of this network, and you would go on, and it's like, oh, this is the Elm Street group, right? And we all talk about things on Elm Street. And so that's what Nextdoor is, essentially. So my wife had actually joined Nextdoor, and one of the things she remarked to me was like, man, she's like, our neighbors are like super racist. And I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, man, they just go on Nextdoor and they're just posting like super racist stuff. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. So Nextdoor realized they had a problem with sort of casual racism in this way, and it's usually in the form of a crime report. So what you would want from a crime report is like, oh, I saw a bad guy break into a car and steal a car, not I saw a person of a color that I'm not familiar with on my street, and that made me think there was crime going on. So the question you're really asking is, can software help you be less racist without saying, please be less racist? So they did this in an amazing way. First of all, when you start with a crime report, there's this, EULA. We talked about, okay, click, and now you get the EULA of like, here's some things we're going to tell you before we let you do this. Focus on the behavior, descriptions of the hair, not just the skin color, all the identifying parts of that person, their clothes, their height, all that stuff. And also, please don't be a racist, right? But here's the brilliant part. When you start doing the crime report, they require specific things about that person. You cannot put, I just saw a brown person on my street. You have to put, I saw a person wearing this hat, these shoes, of this height, of this age, and they're actually teaching you to make a better crime report. Any police person would tell you a good crime report, a good incident report is going to have all the identifying features of the person, not just race. That's not a good crime report. So the beauty of this is you're not saying, please don't be racist. You're saying, please make a good crime report. And along the way, maybe we can teach you to be a little less racist. So, that I thought was amazing. And this is, I think, in the modern era, this is what software should be doing. It should be teaching people how to be better people, not like, how to deal with the software. There's this other great book called Nudge. So the just-in-time reminders are great. Like, at the time the specific thing is happening, you jump in with just the advice they would need, specific to that time. There's also gentle nudges you can give, like, all the time. And an example of that, it's kind of the opposite of every supermarket checkout lane you've ever seen, where the junk food
for kids should be up high so they can't reach it as easily. And then the healthy food is at eye level and like easy to reach. So the thing you're doing here is encouraging people to say, hey, you can choose the junk food, but it's a little bit harder. It will be easier for you if you just grab an apple, right, which is right there at eye level. So I think you can also do this in software, where what you're saying is, look, I want to make the right thing easy to do, and I'm not going to say you can't do the wrong thing. I'm not going to say, no, you can't have junk food, but I'm going to make it more awkward for you. Like, I'm going to put that in kind of an out-of-the-way area that takes 5 steps instead of the 1 step of the easy thing that I really want you to do. So the other thing that's kind of scary about this is I talked about our hyper-connectedness. So when you go to Nextdoor, you know, how many interactions with my neighbors do I really have on a weekly or monthly basis? I mean, I might see them in the driveway. I might see them on the sidewalk and say hi. You know, but when would I have the opportunity to really learn their feelings and their actual, you know, thoughts on, you know, important issues of the day? And that is why Airbnb became kind of racist, is because we're all hyper-connected now. When you were renting from, so Airbnb, the function of Airbnb is to find a place to stay, right? So if you go to a hotel is not going to be racist because that's bad for business, and it's also kind of illegal on some level. But it's not illegal for your neighbor to be racist, right? I mean, maybe it should be, but it's not. So what you're finding out is once you unlock all these peer-to-peer connections, all this hyper-connectedness, you may not like what you find out about some of the people that you meet that you wouldn't have ever known. I would never have known this stuff about my neighbors from just, you know, months of waving from the driveway. So one thing that you see a lot on sites, and another, I think, great gentle nudge, and so many sites do this, as you're on the site for a while, once you hang out on the site for a while, you start giving a little bit more nudges to people because they're clearly interacting with the content, like they're reading it, they're scrolling. Like Discourse, for example, measures read time. Like I can tell you exactly how long everything was on your screen because, well, the next slide, because reading is fundamental, because it's so critical to what we're doing. But as you hang out on a site and stay there more, it's okay to start nudging people. It's like, hey, it looks like you're enjoying this. Did you want to share this content, or do you want to sign up for our newsletter? I think that's a really good pattern, because you're doing it based on a behavior. You know, the user is hanging out there and actually starting to interact with you. But reading, if you think about discussions and like the high level of what I was trying to accomplish with Discourse, any good discussion involves just as much listening as talking. I mean, right now I'm giving a presentation, so it's all me talking, but if we were having a conversation and I just never shut up, is that a good conversation for you? Is that a good conversation for me? I would argue, no, it's not. There's a lot of reading and listening that needs to go on. And the sad thing about traditional forum software is they got this so deeply wrong. Every forum software I can ever think of, the first thing they show next to your name is like, how many posts did you make? Right? Like, that's the thing we're going to incentivize. The number next to your name is like, yay, it's my post count. And you want that to go up, right? Because big numbers are good, and the number's next to your name. So a big number next to your name must mean you're really good, right? So what are we incentivizing? We're incentivizing talking. And that's the opposite of what you want in a discussion. You want to incentivize listening and reading, right? You want talking, but in proportion to the listening. So that was so disturbing to me in software, is like just how wrong they got it. Was that this was like accepted. We still have people come to Discourse like, I need to show a post count next to the username. I'm like, no, you don't. You're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. And now I'll explain to you why. But yeah, it's just scary how wrong they got that. And not only that, but you know, the carpet bombing of talking points has got to stop, right? Like, I get that, you know, everybody has strong feelings about issues, and there's certain understandings of issues, but like, you got to really listen, not just wait for your turn to talk. And it should be really your story. I don't think people want talking points. They don't want like that. They want your experience. Some of the most powerful interactions I've had in Discourse have been like people with a very different background than mine telling me a story about their life. Like Boing Boing, for example, has a huge community of transgender people, and I didn't know anything about transgender people. And they were just talking about stuff that happened to them in the bathroom, and I was like, holy crap. I had no idea the bathroom was so dangerous for people, you know, that have gender transitions. Like, I just didn't know. As a white dude who just goes to the bathroom, I had no idea. So it was really illuminating, and that was their story, right? It was them telling me what had happened to them. It wasn't talking points like, listen to this thing that happened to me. Let me share this story with you, right? And that kind of changed my mind in a way that carpet-bombing talking points would not. So Ars Technica did this really cool experiment. I don't know what year it was, but they posted an article about gun control. So already you're in controversial territory, right? You're dealing with people are going to have strong opinions on either side. In paragraph 7, it's in the middle, that little green circle, they put the words in, if you read this far, please mention bananas in your comment below. We're pretty sure 90% of the respondents to the story won't even read it first. And then the comments start. So you can see it starting here on this page. I'm going to scroll down. So here's the comments. Still going. Still going. And finally, you have one person, I mean, how many pages with, I don't even know, that actually read, paragraph 7 of this article, which said, mention bananas, this article's kind of a test, right? So are people even reading the stuff that you're putting on the page before they comment, right? They're not. They're taking their preconceived notions, maybe they'll read the title, and then they're just going to start dropping science on you, whatever they view as science, right? They're just going to here's my opinion about this thing that I didn't even read, but I'm just going to tell you some stuff right now. So how do you get people to actually read? Well, first of all, I hate pagination. I feel like pagination is one of the worst things we've come up with. I mean, maybe it made sense in 1999, but this idea that you got to paginate content, and then when you scroll to the bottom, you click next page, is immediate friction to reading. If you want people to read, make it easy for them to read. So when you scroll down, stuff just keeps coming, right? You don't have to click next page. You just scroll, 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 and as you scroll, you get more stuff, right? That was built into Discourse from day 0 because I want people to read the stuff that is written here. So the more barriers I can remove from their reading, the more they're going to read statistically, right? Now, since we did this, I noticed a lot of sites have started doing this. YouTube has started auto-playing the next video. I'm sure you've seen this, where you'll play a video, and it's like YouTube's like, hey, cool, here's another video kind of like that one. Just bam, right? And you're like, whoa, I didn't really sign up for that, but hey, it's kind of cool, so I don't know. And then news sites, like this is a news site. I think I was reading that first article, and then I noticed, oh God, I scrolled to the bottom of that article, and it's like, here's the next article. Here you go, enjoy. And I didn't really pick that article, but I was like, okay, whatever, right? That's another way to do it. Just start immediately feeding the next set of content, which may or may not even be related. Another cool thing you can do, if people post a comment and you kind of want to know, did you actually read the article? Well, first you could test them. You could put in the banana test, right? Like, did you mention the word bananas? Then I know you actually read the article. You could show the amount of time they actually read the source article. Steam does this for reviews. So if you're posting a review of a Steam game and you played it 10 minutes, you're like, this game sucks, and it says right next to that person's name, 10 minutes played, it's like, well, what kind of opinion can you have in 10 minutes of a game? That's not really even enough to give it a chance. Or if it's 300 hours, that might be kind of disturbing, right? Depending on the game, I don't know. So one thing you could do is show how long they actually read the article. When they post their comment, Discourse does highlight new users, because new users are kind of you're not sure about them yet, so their name is in gray. But one thing you could do, we haven't done this yet, a lot of stuff we're still experimenting and still figuring out, is you could show read time of the topic. The other thing you could do, there's this startup civil comments. Before you can leave a comment, you have to rate other people's comments. So you post a comment, you click submit, and then sort of a, Lucy with the football moment. It's like, okay, we can post your comment, but first, you have to rate these other comments on quality and civility. And it's kind of a cool thing, because you go through and you rate, and then there's a twist. You rate 2 comments, and then you rate yourself, which I think is brilliant, right? You're like, whoa, now I'm rating myself. Well, how civil was I? Is this actually contributing to the conversation? It's a really neat design. So you could do stuff like that. So we talked about just in time, we talked about nudges, and then there's really basic level of reinforcement, which I'll just get to the spoiler, which is basically dog training, which is you reward the behaviors that you want and you ignore everything else. So I do think that works. There is one caveat to this, which is I think some human behaviors can be so negative that I don't think they can really be ignored. So what I like to do is what I call suppress and redirect, where if you have a discussion that's really just going off the rails, it's in a bad place, right? This discussion is not going anywhere good, you can kind of shuffle that discussion off into kind of a protected or hidden area of your site. So it's not like on the main page anymore, right? There's a thing, I forget, I think one form software calls it syncing. It's like the opposite of bumping, right? When you bump a topic, you reply, and then it goes to the top. Well, you sync a topic, that means replies no longer bump it, meaning it'll just tend to flow down the list of time and is no longer following the normal rules of physics in a discussion, which is you reply and it goes back up to the top, bobs back up like something floating in the water. So I do think you have to, ignoring is not really enough. It depends on the type of behavior. So on rewarding behaviors, you have to be really careful that you're actually rewarding the behavior that you think you're rewarding. By that I mean, every time you give someone a positive reward, every time you have a badge, every time you put a number next to someone's name, you need to think, what if I was an insane person with an unlimited amount of time whose only goal in life was to get this number to go up? What would I do? And what would that look like? Right? Because that is ultimately what's going to happen eventually, and you need to plan for that. It's what I call designing for evil, but it's not really just evil. It's just people can be incredibly motivated by numbers next to their names. And that can cause them to do things that are very surprising to you as a person building software. So I think the takeaway here is to put yourself in the mindset of an attacker, kind of, with every feature that you build. How will this feature be used against me? How will this feature be used against other people in this discussion? And if you can't come up with plausible answers for that, you need to rethink what you're doing. So other little tiny things that we do in discourse, like one thing that always bugged me was you're reading a discussion and you want to start replying. It's like, oh, cool, let me, I know you said this, and let me reply to that. I wanted replies to be organic in the sense that you continue to reply as you're reading. Like, reading is so important that I don't want replying to take away. A lot of old school software, when you click reply, it teleports you to like, oh, now you're in reply mode. You can't read anymore. You're just composing your reply, right? Now, modern software doesn't do that, so that problem has kind of fallen by the wayside. But the logic is sound. You want replies to live alongside reading. Nothing should interrupt your reading. So you can see here it's like an expandable panel. I can bring it up. I can put it down. I can reply and read at the same time, because that's how important reading is. I don't want anything to be in the way of that. So another positive reinforcement thing is things users are going to do anyway, which is like paste links. There's this standard called Open Graph and OEmbed, which has become very common since 2012. It means any website will have a basic set of tags and an image, so you can like summarize a link. So when someone pastes a link into a discussion, you grab that link and format the content so the user basically feels awesome. It's like, wow, cool, I posted a link, and look how cool this link is, and I didn't have to do anything. I just pasted a link like I would normally. I mean, what is the web except for a bunch of shared links? Like, to me, this is very essential, critical behavior for any web-based thing, is like a link, right? That's what we do. We link things together. So having that happen. One thing we actually added recently to Discourse is what we call a mini one box, where internal topics, rather than the raw link, we'll put the title in there and essentially construct that for you. So you don't have to, like, rather than looking like a long URL, it's like the actual title of the page that becomes automatically hyperlinked. That's in addition to the one boxing. Slack calls this unfurling, but it's a great technique. So the other thing about discussions, particularly modern discussions, is, again, discourse is not chat. And I spend a lot of time explaining to people that discourse is about structured discussion. It doesn't have to be like super long discussion, but the unit of work is really the sentence. It's not the word like it is in chat, where you're like, yep, nope, cool, emoji. That's Slack, that's chat systems. That's not really what we do. It's great, it's wonderful, you need it, but it's not what we do. It's complementary to what we do. So that being said, people do expect sort of a real-time, almost, interaction with people at this point. So it has to be fast, and it has to be updating in real time. So when we built Discourse, we built this message bus technology so that when you're replying and you get a reply, like, you'll see it happen kind of in real time. Like, if you're reading a discussion and new stuff comes in, you'll see that happen. Like, you'll see new replies come in. If somebody edits a reply, you'll see the edit like res in real time. So it feels very organic. It feels like this is not like a static web page that I have to press refresh and I'll come back in a few days. It's like, if you want a real-time-ish discussion, we can give that to you, because sometimes that's what discussions need. They need to be rapid fire. They need to be going pretty fast. because it feels more like a dynamic, like real discussion at that point versus I send an email, wait a day for a response, then you send an email, another day goes by, right? So we wanted that real-time effect. Some of the badging stuff that we're doing, showing up is 90% of the job. Like, I feel like this is true of parenting. Like, raising children is very, very difficult, as I covered in my keynote. There's a lot of things you can do wrong, but the good news is 90% of the job really is just showing up and being present for your children. Not that you said the right thing, not that you did the right thing, because you probably won't, but that you were there, right? You didn't miss the thing, right? You were there with them. And I think that's also true of communities. People who show up consistently are kind of the backbone of your community. And we actually have a streak badge now. Since I put this slide together, we have, GitHub does this, Stack Overflow, when I was there, we had this. You know, you get a badge for being there 10 days in a row. You get a badge for being there 100 days in a row. That kind of stuff has been added. And the more you're there, the more we trust you. Like, the person who hangs out with us all the time, we feel like we know that person. And you actually get an ambient increase in your trust level based on simple repeat participation. Even if you don't actually post, you do have to read. But as long as you're reading and hanging out there, we'll trust you more. So obviously, rewarding content. I mean, I think this is you know, bedrock stuff. If people are liking the content that's posted, you know, special awards for that, acknowledgments for that. On the user's profile page, we're going to show off sort of your best work, right? You'll notice here, this person has visited 1,500 days in the discussion. And you know, we have all these stats about like, how much have you actually read? So just to contrast with this with Stack Overflow for a minute. So Stack Overflow, we sort by reputation score. So what you're seeing here is like the weekly reputation scores for people. The sorting here is very important. In discourse, what we do, it's not a system of competition, it's a system of collaboration. Like competition, you know, at Stack Overflow. You want your answer to be the best, there can be more than one, but you're still competing at some level. But in discourse, you're collaborating. So what you're seeing here is the ambient sort is now based on likes received, but also likes given. Because you're not supposed to be drawing all the emotion out of the room, you're supposed to be giving some of it back, right? So what you're seeing here, we're not saying this, but the sort says it for us, is, oh, look, these people have given as much as they have received, right? And that's kind of the goal of the community. When you go to the user directory, it's like that's the primary sort order, is how much you've given and also how much you've received. So my main pieces of advice for, you know, driven user design, you definitely need aspirational guidelines. Not having a list of things that you believe in means that you technically don't believe in anything. So you do need that, but it's not going to be as useful as you think it's going to be, because it's all about how do you get people to actually do those things. That's the hard part of this. Coming up with the rules is not the hard part. So for getting people to do it, the just-in-time nudges, and again, I highly recommend the Dan Ariely book, the Nudge book. There's a lot of places. I want you to think when you're designing your software, when is the moment in my software where I can speak to the user and give them really good advice about what they maybe should do next, right? That's the thing to think about. And then from a general design perspective, the things you want people to do that are positive, make that like unbelievably easy to do. And focus all your effort on just like creating this really simple slide, you know, fall into the pit of success and do the right things, and focus on those so that they'll be easy for people to do. And then, of course, reward positive behaviors, but also suppress and redirect negative behaviors. That's a little more challenging. But I think those are the 4 things that I've learned from building Discourse, and you know, hopefully they'll be useful to you as you build software. And I think that's all I have for you. Thank you. Do we do questions? I guess we don't. Well, if you have questions, come up and talk to me. I'm happy to do one-on-one. I'm not in a hurry to leave, so feel free to come up, ask me any questions you have.